Patriotic shades
yeah.
on.
It takes a few seconds. There we go. Hello, everybody out there on wherever you might be watching on Song News Network Facebook page or elsewhere on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. Where else? Yeah, I think that's about it. And
all the things.
all the things. And yeah, this is going out live on those various places, and it'll be archived at Song News Network's Facebook page and elsewhere, including in
YouTube
podcast
page.
form if you look for This Week with David Rovix wherever you get your podcasts. All right, there's the where you can find this later. And now as to what we're doing here, me and Paula are back again with our approximately once a month or so Song News Network broadcast where we talk to a particular artist of note. And today we are spending the hour with Cosmo, who is a brilliant songwriter who lives in Cardiff, Wales. And we've got Australia, west coast of the U.S. and Wales here, so that we're all speaking to you from what I would say is a very inconvenient time. And luckily, Cosmo has a good wig and good glasses to make the situation tenable.
It's all happening.
Props. Awesome props.
Yeah, we got props.
Always.
And for those who don't know, the Cosmo's Bandcamp site is below at the streaming by on the bottom there. And Cosmo, you're a brilliant songwriter, and you have been putting out a lot of more music all the time, as we always hope the great songwriters are going to do. And your the COVID tapes, you and TV Smith and I think me and a lot of other people have done solo acoustic albums, all very much related to the pandemic. And you just came out with one called the COVID tapes. It's the thing, you know. But has the pandemic been? I mean, like, has it actually been good for your creative process, or not so much?
Wow, that's a big one, isn't it? It's definitely seems to be somewhat somewhat blasé doing these concept albums of the pandemic. But I know lots of people. Hammer on Trial did a really good one as well, actually.
Yes, that's beautiful.
That's a really, really good one. I think for me, because it finished off a whole period that I was working and various things in my personal life. I was a carer and not having an awful lot of time to do an awful lot of things other than work and care and travel around the country in a loop. Then the lockdown came, and suddenly I had time on my hands, and then it was just like, boom, all the music came out, and I'd sit myself in this very room, probably around about here where I'm sitting now, every Friday.
Didn't you soundproof it yourself and stuff?
Well, it's not soundproof, it's sort of acoustic treatment. It's just all kind of. In fact, I'm sure the neighbours wish it was soundproof. We had a session in here today. Fucking hell. Do you know what I mean? But they're very kind and considerate. They had a party the other week and they've just moved in. They're a bunch of young uns. So they said, we had a party.
It's fine then.
Yeah, and it's all right.
Still in the centre, sort of really central Cardiff, kind of.
Sort of, yeah. Just sort of slightly outside of it. But I sit myself in here every Friday and just try and come up with a song and sing it to camera and put it out that evening. And I think having that challenge just really helps me on so many levels. Just, the expressive level, get things out there, share it with the group, make some music, raise some smiles, get people thinking. And
and that's the thing about the COVID tapes is that you wrote all those songs on the go as the sort of initial part of the lockdown was happening, right?
That's it, yeah.
So which is quite unusual because I've found a lot of there was some songs that were written at the time, but that's what I like about it is you're bringing in current events in a really direct way with those songs. Yeah, which is
well, so much was happening, wasn't it? It was just like.
Well,
overwhelming, too much to process. But I mean, that can go different ways for different people, right? I mean, if you're overwhelmed with too much to process, you can shut down and just, shut it off, or you can, you can just become an engine of creativity, or there's a
Do
lot of
that
different
really.
responses, right? And I think,
Yeah.
I mean, another thing with the pandemic, with so many performers, there's another thing that's I kind of,
Yeah.
maybe it's been talked about too much at this point. I don't know, but it's like, there's just so many people who are used to traveling and performing who are kind of, emotionally dependent on that and have no other devices to sort of fall back on when that's not, or economically dependent on, or both. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I've just seen a lot of people sort of completely fall apart, and I,
Mm.
has what's
Yeah.
been like surviving, and what are you seeing as far as your community there in terms of getting through wherever there is. I don't know what there is anymore. I mean, Wales or the world or the internet. Or you got any thoughts on survival?
Well, I think it's those sort of things are really interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of those barriers that we've been going on about for years, like class and all those sort of things, they just seem to sort of come down very heavily with the pandemic. So it's just been very much like that here. Um, People with the delivery jobs and doing all that kind of thing are out and about in the danger zone, and there's people at home stuck at home, and there's people who should be at home who are out, and people who are out who should be at home, and so
All on the
I
same
think that
block.
was yeah, that's it, all on the same block.
That's
Yeah, all here.
that's a line from a Darren Hanlon song. Who, my neighbours are all swanning around all over town like mobile petri dishes. I think I sent you that song. Yeah.
Another pandemic song.
Yeah, because you wrote a song called "Don't Grass on Your Neighbours," right? That was a whole thing as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, we had this. The government sort of had at one point had a hotline where you could just doff it in your neighbours if they've been out too much. And I just thought, how do what the fuck is all that about? But it's interesting, isn't it? Because I suppose, like with a lot of places, we had exactly the opposite stuff going on. It's all this kind of Kropotkin-like mutual aid going on.
Yes.
Yes. Everyone was helping everyone.
Very obvious, and in the US as well. Yeah.
What's been happening with how is that manifested in Cardiff? How can you paint us a little picture of what it's been like around there?
No.
Well, I mean, I think Portland, Oregon is in the news a lot, and you can just like put a dumpster on fire, and then you got the picture. But I mean, I don't know. I'm not hearing a bunch about Cardiff.
Besides the rampaging Kashmiri goats.
That was a very seminal moment.
Seminal moment. The goats. What happened with the goats?
Oh, you didn't see that? Yeah.
That was when Wales finally made some, international headlines.
I know.
What happened?
Kashmiri goats invaded the town of London.
There's a YouTube video, It was that period where, everything shut down everywhere, and then nature started taking over. It was like a return to Eden scenario. Yeah.
But you saw it. You were there for the goats. I mean, for like not on YouTube, but in real life, yeah?
No. London is a bit further up north from where I am.
It wasn't. It wasn't in Cardiff. Okay.
No, sadly not. No.
It was awesome.
I was in Kyoto, Japan, one time, a long time ago, when all the talk of the town was when the monkeys came down from the mountains and were like jumping around in the town, like they ran out of water up there, and it was like, a very memorable experience for the folks.
Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah, and this was there's some lord up there in the north of Wales who has Kashmiri goats, the ones with the big horns. And when everything locked down, they just kind of went on a rampage through the town and ate all the hedges and stuff. Right?
Yeah,
so there's video of it.
The hedge,
yeah, it was part of that. Animals started. We had a kangaroo jumping through the CBD, going looking for a park here, right? But there was no one in town, so it just.
That's not something you smoke. That is Australian for Central Business District. I forgot. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, Central Business District. Yeah.
Here it's something you smoke. So
in Adelaide we call it town.
What's going on? What's been happening with
mutual aid
in Cardiff with mutual aid and.
Well, to be honest, it's been just really. I mean, it's just been really oversubscribed in a lot of ways where we are. So whenever you needed anything or whenever you needed anything, there was just these groups. WhatsApp groups, and you could just go, I need, and suddenly you have about 8, 9, 10 people on it. So we had that going on. We've also had little kind of community groups setting up with food and food banks and all these kind of things. And we had, well, I mean, I think the interesting thing was when I was trying to get, so my mum lives in London. She was having all sorts of problems at one point, and I actually tapped into the mutual aid group there in order to get rid of a dead cat from her garden, which she wasn't able to get rid of herself. But literally within a couple of hours, we had 2 people around there sorting it out, and that was in London, which I hadn't been to for years. So, you know, that was great. So, I mean, these things are all working. I don't know whether they are the bulwarks of the anarchist revolution, comrade. A lot of people tend to make out. They've obviously been very useful and very helpful, and massive significance to, you know, a lifeline to a lot of people. But I don't know what you feel. I mean, whenever you read about them, they tend to be bigged up as this sort of like, this is the future, this is what's going to take us forward. But I'm not 100% convinced.
It doesn't seem like enough by itself. No. I mean, not in the. I mean, you got this. I mean, one thing that's been in the news a lot in relation to generally in the U.S. as well as throughout the UK is the outrageous rise in the cost of housing, and as long as that, you know, as long as the Ponzi scheme of the housing market is the dominant feature of the economy in these countries, then of course mutual aid can't possibly be enough, right? Because everybody is going to get evicted. I mean, I don't know, unless the mutual aid is going to involve like, you know, real militant stuff, keeping everybody housed, and I don't know. It's what do you think though? What's going on? I mean, that's been in the news a lot. Like as far as global headlines, how completely insane the British housing market is. Is it crazy in Cardiff as well, or it's not just in London? It's outside of London as well. That the prices are going nuts, right?
Yeah, well, we've just had this. The Chancellor here has pulled an economic trick out of his bag, and he's gone boom. And I think this was something just to get us through Brexit. So he's kind of
an economic rabbit.
Yeah, he's inflated the housing market, so it's kind of doing all those things that it shouldn't be doing, but it's creating a lot of money and a lot of all the rest of it that goes with it, evictions and all the rest of it for people that are on the sharp end of it. But we have had moratoriums as well. So I think we've just had another one here in Wales. They're not going to evict people. It's been put back again. So there's these little victories going on. So you've got, on the one hand, I know people are buying houses. People are, you know, it started to open up because it was really at a peak just before Brexit. And on the other hand, you have got threatened evictions, but there are, you know, moratoriums on it. So
so it's like the shit's going to hit the fan at some point is what kind of people are feeling like, or is it like when the moratorium ends, or I mean, is that one of the possibilities?
Well, I think when
the eviction wave will begin. Is that what people are talking about?
Yeah, I think that's certainly something people are keeping their eyes on. All the sort of community organisations are keeping their eyes on now, just thinking, okay, that's definitely a point in which, you know, we can make ourselves useful. There was not really in the same thing, but they were trying to evict some immigrant family in Scotland a couple of weeks back, and that made, I don't know, you heard about that, didn't you? They all piled in.
Glasgow basically went, nah. It was great.
Trying to evict who?
So there was an immigrant family in Glasgow, and the police turned up, take them away, and the community said, "No, you're not going to do it. We're just," and they surrounded the van and blocked the van until they let them go.
Yeah, the entire area, the entire neighbourhood turned up. Street was packed. Because you know, Glasgow, right?
Well, I heard about that now. I just didn't realize that was what it was about. But like, there was all kinds of people I was noticing on Facebook from the Glaswegians, like, oh, there's something happening. A lot of people came out for that. Okay, but get at the details.
Lots and lots of people came out for that.
But that's the thing.
What's that?
That's the thing. I think that
situation, like, how are people are like? I mean, I know this is a subject you guys are so tired of talking about, but what's the scene in Cardiff? I mean, it's like it's just one of those. Nobody talks about Cardiff. I mean, I never hear about Cardiff. So I mean, what are the Wales? Period. You know,
capital of bloody Wales,
no
for crying
idea.
out loud. Good gosh, I ran out of words.
Just don't tell that to the Welsh, huh? But I mean, I don't know. Well, how is it playing out there? Like, I mean, we hear a lot about Scotland, you know, and a lot about England, nothing about Wales. I don't know, you know, if there's anything to report as far as like.
We discovered that Wales has a prime minister.
The dragon. That's a Welsh flag on those
yes.
sunglasses for those who
Very
don't
much.
know what the message is.
There's a guy from Ireland who does these skits about British and Irish politics, and whenever Wales appears, the big joke is no one's ever heard of him, or no one knows what he's doing, or no one knows anything about him. That's kind of what it's like. But excuse me, right? We do exist, and this is the Welsh flag for all you people who don't know what it is.
And you have the coolest flag anywhere.
Yeah,
and
we do.
You know,
and
I mean, look, it's a dragon.
It's
just,
yeah.
The other
lots of uprisings. Wales has heaps of uprisings.
I mean, there's the machine gun flag, but that's kind of violent, you know. I mean, I understand Mozambique or something. Where is that? Where do they have that? But you know, everybody else has stripes and stars and stuff like that. And that's kind of dull, but you know, I mean, easy to reproduce, I suppose.
Dragons are cooler.
Dragons are much cooler, you know, much more intricate.
Well,
the Welsh flag.
I think we've had this whole situation. So Scotland's obviously in the news because there's a massive independence movement there, and I guess I'm sure you've heard a lot of all about this, but there's a lot of people on the left who jumped on that as a way of thinking, okay, well, we might not be nationalists, but we might be able to find a way of putting things to the left if we have an independent country. So
the left Brexit folks who got a lot of shit from the folks who thought that independence was the same thing as the left. Right?
Brexit was basically like someone having a shit in the petrol tank, you know, and it just kind of goes around and seizes everything up. Yep. And then people just try and open up the engine to look into it and think, we'll sort this out, and just get covered in shit. And no matter what happens, everyone just gets covered in shit, basically. So as soon as you mention the word Brexit, you get covered in shit. If you try and suggest anything about it, you get covered in shit. It's just like, all right. And what's funny is that
debates like that in the world left, I think. But yeah, continue, please.
Yeah.
So
well, no, I mean, there were the Lexiteers. So the old Labour Party thought, you know, back in the day when they were a leftish wing party before Tony Blair, their policy was leave the EU. So, you know, a lot of people would be quite happy. That generation of lefty people would sort of think, oh yeah, out, yeah, we want out. But I think the big question was, well, you can do that if you want, but who's going to take us out? Who are you handing the keys to the car to? And these aren't nice lefty people, although we sort of had this kind of Jeremy Corbyn moment for a bit of time where it was like, oh yeah. But that wasn't.
I mean, he could have done something maybe with the whole thing, but it's a bad situation to inherit regardless, huh?
Yeah, it'd have been very difficult. I think the problem we got when you've got like the British, the army came out within a few weeks of him becoming leader and said we don't want him. The British army, who do not get involved in politics, came out and said they didn't want him. Yeah,
they got rid of him by false accusations of anti-Semitism anyway. But even if he had been able to stay in and as the leader of the party, and even if he had been elected, it still would have been a situation where most of the members of Parliament of the Labour Party wouldn't have been on his side, even if most voters for Labour would have been on his side, right? So that's quite a problematic situation to be in, right? It would have been
I think this is the thing, and also I think the problem that you've got is just that with a lot of it's the same with a lot of these people diving into nationalism. I mean, we have it here in Wales as well. People thinking, oh, we'll pull politics to the left by becoming independent, and you know, there's definitely a case to be had there. But I just think what a lot of people on the left are missing here is the grunt work. It's like you don't really party politics is all. At the moment, very much sort of like a popularity contest, and without any real power, you're not really going to shift things. So, for example, we've just heard now that the union membership has gone up slightly, having had decades of decline. So it's sort of slightly going up because I think Uber now have recognised GMB, which is one of the big unions here, and that's a big step forward. I think organising casual workers, organising people in the casualised industries and all this kind of stuff. That's where you kind of build, but it's a lot of grunt work. It's a lot of really hard work,
and that's been going on for years, right? I've been following those organisers, right? That's been a long campaign, yeah, and that's something that you doesn't get shown with the left because we erupt into the news when big things happen, but. And David Graeber's pointed this out, and I was going to say this about mutual aid, right? It's always there, all of that stuff is always there. All those organisers who've been organising in the gig economy and the career industry in England, that's been going on for a long time. We're only now seeing the results. One of those results is a rise in union membership, but that's what's kept us all going, right? I think that's one of the interesting things about the pandemic is to show that mutual aid's going on all of the time. When there's a crisis, it steps up. But that's what's kept capitalism going, right? That's how we survive from one crisis of capitalism to the next, is all of that mutual aid and that natural community, which, give us half a chance and we go build it, right? So
people at least try, right? But it doesn't mean they actually succeed.
But,
in this country,
but you also
are a bit hungry, so it's not working, as far as they're concerned, right?
Yes, but there is a lot of things that are working, and sometimes a big problem with the left. I think I've been reading David Graeber, right? Sometimes we don't know when we've won, right? So I think that's important to keep in mind too. Yeah, and that's right, and that it has an effect. It changes things over time. It's hard to see.
Yeah, I'm all down with all of that, as you know. I think that it's a lot of work, and there's a lot to be done, and I think it's probably a lot that's going to be off radar. And I get slightly concerned that we're kind of like in this country where people are sort of jumping on Brexit, jumping on Scottish nationalism, jumping on Welsh nationalism, and it's like, well, I'm not entirely sure this stuff is going to pull us to the left. If you want to pull to the left, then organise from the left and organise all these things that Paul has just been talking about. That's the stuff that takes a certain kind of mindset and a certain kind of bloody-mindedness, I think, and we need more of it. And it's not something, like you said, we're starting to see results now from work that's gone on for years. So it's going to take a lot longer just to build all that up. So I think that's where we are. And that's what I'm looking at. And if all, people want to stick up different national flags on their parliament buildings, then that's absolutely fine with me. But what about the bloody workers? That's what I say. There we are.
What about the bloody workers? Is this
exactly? Thank you.
Question. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, for sure. There's a requirement for a lot of that reflection and for thinking. I think that's another thing that's shown that this experience over the past year has shown us. Nation states are fake, right? Nation states are imaginary things that we make up in our own head. We're one planet, and we're one economy, all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, that's been really interesting. But I think you're right. I think there's kind of a retreat into the familiar, right? Because it was such a massive year for people. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, we've got this kind of return to this sort of shit and Brexit. We've got this point
normality.
Well, it's a kind of normality, but it's more like this kind of island mentality of anyone who's not on the island or from the island is either to be feared or to be conquered, or and if you think of all the ways that you can respond to anything, that's fairly on the lowest kind of section of your response network, so So like they've been turning away EU nationals who, up until a few months ago could come travel freely to and from the country here. They've been turning them away. They've been putting them in deportation centres. We've had this hostile environment which has been going on years with people of colour, where we've had the Windrush generation. A lot of them has been sent back to the Caribbean countries they've been away from for years and years and years. I mean, it's just like it is one world, but not for us lot, or not for for certain people. They're not allowed. Not allowed. It's very much that's it. So.
That's it's Australia plus, right? It's I mean, we've been following a xenophobic island policy for a long time now, but it's got worse. And all of the refugees and immigrants here are not entitled to welfare benefits, right? So they've just been abandoned, and we've closed our borders. We're the only country where we're not allowed out, right? And
is that the situation right now? Like, that's not normally the situation, but with the during the pandemic, that's is that how it is right now? You can't nobody's coming in or out right now.
Well, there are people coming in. There are people going out, and they are from the privileged class, because we're still getting. There's been an outbreak in Melbourne recently. They've had to have a lockdown and all that sort of stuff, and so. But because our quarantine system doesn't work, and it's a complicated situation, but I think basically what's happened is our federal government, which is as neoliberal as they come, right? My partner calls them Trump light. They have simultaneously abandoned their responsibilities and tried to pretend that there is no problem. There's a whole lot going on. It's very similar to what happened in the UK. But that whole island mentality, that's very Australian as well. And so I suppose that's what I'm pointing to, is that you've got sides of conflict there. So nation states in the UK, in the US, here, most of Europe are trying to use the old methods of saving the economy for their own benefit, right? But there's on the ground, what we're all looking at is, well, it's not working. This is not working. Something else has got to work a different way, and I don't think anybody knows what that is yet necessarily, except maybe the Kurds in Rojava. So
it's true. I think
we seem to be doing the best at it at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, we there's certain parts of the British top end of politics who are just looking to Australia in so many ways with all of this stuff. Including having farming out their sort of refugee asylum application process to other countries, and just unbelievable stuff like. But
do you know how appalling our system is here? Oh,
what's
don't do that.
Like,
yeah.
Can I know you got relatives in Hungary too. I mean, what's it been like as far as getting back and forth? I mean, I don't know how much of this during the pandemic you don't. Probably it's kind of on hold to a large extent in terms of finding out what this whole situation is going to be like. But what are your? I mean, we've been hearing about these people being detained and stuff on the news, but it's really happening on a large scale. Is that your impression?
Well, it's in the hundreds from when I last looked, but I think that it's. I think that the thing that you've got at the moment with a lot of the problems that the government should be getting about Brexit right now, they're not getting because of the pandemic. So it's covering up a lot of these problems. It's completely obscuring them, and it's unfortunate, really. But when you get the liberal press or the BBC coming out and saying, "Look, this is happening to all these EU migrants or EU visitors, visitors from the EU coming to the UK, and they're being detained and put in detention centres," then you've got a whole section of the population is like, "Good, great, that's what we want. Go on." So for all that's upsetting people and upsetting obviously the people affected by it, to say the least, there are people who are just like, well, that's what they voted for. Really, they wanted to get rid of all of the blooming foreigners. Basically, didn't want them here, and that's again something I addressed in the album. The final track, but one, it's all of that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and the key workers situation is such that you've been one of a number of people who've written songs on addressing that question of so some people are safely isolating at home. So many others are out there dying and working low wage jobs.
Well, actually, just what? Yeah, go on.
You're working as a carer, aren't you, Cosmo? Didn't you say that
I
before?
was, yeah.
So you would have been an essential worker. Like I'm working in residential aged care, so same thing. Yeah. Did any of your neighbours dob you in?
No, they
What's
didn't.
That mean? Dob you in? Wait, I'm learning.
Oh,
a new
grass.
word here.
Did any of your neighbours grass on you? Snitch
No,
on you on that
two
hotline?
new words. I didn't look up that. What is grassing your neighbors? Oh, that's
Snitch.
like narking. Narking.
Yeah.
Right? Is that what we
narking?
Yeah.
That would be the
You
American
don't have the
term,
word
yeah.
grass. You don't have the word grass.
We
Paula,
don't have either
they're missing
grassing
out. These
or
Americans.
dobbing.
Yeah, they are. There's a whole lot of British colloquialisms that are so useful.
Well, in England, they have 5 different words for every one word we have here to describe the same thing, I find. I mean, there's like...
Have we? Do we?
It always seems to me that you have multiple ways to say things that I don't know as many ways of saying it. It's like, it feels to me like this is a country where most of the people were learning English as a second language, and the vocabulary just overall, even though, among those of us who grew up speaking it as a first language, we just don't have quite as many words in the vocabulary that got passed down. That may be complete bullshit, but it just seems like I always learn new words when I'm in England. I'm constantly learning.
I think that's because of the regional. It's because of all the regional words. There's words that come from different parts that people still use. Dobbin, grassing. What do you call the space between two houses? The little space you can walk up between two houses. What do you call that? Because in England, there are literally about 20 words, depending on where you are in the country, for that little space between two houses. I
don't even know one word for that, but that is exactly the kind of thing. Like I would run into that kind of thing, and people would refer to this thing like a slipway or whatever. Like I don't even know what that is, And like I drive all the time, but I don't know what a slipway is.
No,
I just wouldn't have had a reference. It wouldn't have occurred to me to have to mention what it just is.
Well, it's a good job. Now we know what a slipway is. Now you know what a slipway is. It's a jolly good thing too, really. Bennett.
It is. Yeah.
Queen's English.
Accidents.
Exactly. Yes. There we are.
Is there a significance to the wig?
But what is that thing called?
That's your Dr. Falkenstein glasses, yes.
What are the different words for that space in between houses?
Well, in Sussex, it was a twitten. It's a twitten. I don't know. I remember calling it a twitten, and someone said, "No, that's not a twitten. It's a blah, blah, blah." I don't know. But in fact, we looked into it and we found out there's different words. I'll find out if you like. It's
yeah. The Scots probably have a different word.
Oh yeah. I
wonder what the Irish call it.
Gordon Bennett. Who knows? They're all they're loving it.
Somebody put up the local words like in the comments or something. We'll have a look.
Yeah.
On the Facebook
I will do.
Yeah. Whatever.
Anybody who's watching,
space
put them up.
Between 2 houses. Yeah.
Yeah.
Words.
Share it with the group. Share it with the group. What is the space between 2 houses? There we go.
Yeah. What do you call it?
Saying she's mentioning the situation in Glasgow that you were talking about earlier, but she also mentions that is on Kenmure Street, which I didn't realize it was on Kenmure Street, but that makes perfect sense. That's the street we all know some folks living on Kenmure Street in Glasgow.
Yeah.
Alistair Hewlett lived there for many years. Fatima lives there, the home of the baths and the center of the resistance in Glasgow.
There's a lot of it about. There's a lot of it
lots
about.
Of that.
Yeah.
But so, what's your sense of the state of any kind of sort of left scene in the ashes of Brexit and the pandemic and stuff? I mean, are you under the impression does it feel like everybody is talking about uh, microaggressions, or is there anything else happening?
Yeah. Wow, therein lies the tale. Good gosh.
Not that I support microaggressions. Just to be clear, I'm totally against microaggressions in principle.
Yeah, I mean, I know. Well, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of the kind of call out culture, I guess, which we're all aware of. We've talked about.
How toxic is that? I mean, do you get the impression is there a lot of that going on around you, or is it if you turn off the computer, then it's not so much, or?
I think that's the thing, isn't it? I think what seems to be happening is that these sort of places where we used to be just sort of saying what we like, with these social media sites over the years, and then suddenly they become very toxic, and suddenly everyone's kind of playing a bit of a game in some way, aren't they? So maybe they're trying to sell something, or they're trying to present themselves in a particular way, or they're trying to kind of say the right thing. So what's going on is you get this kind of conformity that's coming across all these platforms that people, even with toxic behavior. So people are kind of jumping on each other for all sorts of things, appropriately or not. I mean, there's definitely a time and a place for things like that, obviously, but there's obviously sometimes when it's just like, come on, give the guy a break or whatever's going on. But I think that what you end up with is a lot of conversations going on underneath the radar, a lot of conversations that are not happening in public, a lot of little groups and micro groups happening where people are kind of thinking, hang on a minute, what are we doing here? Why are we saying all this stuff? And what about this lot? And reevaluating themselves and the kind of culture around. So I think there's a lot of really interesting conversations on the left and elsewhere going off radar, basically. And there's a public life.
All this?
Yeah.
Or what kind of conversation, like about how to deal with this whole call out culture and all this, that with like the toxicity of social media and that sort of thing?
Yeah, and just sort of finding a way through, I suppose so if you talk about microaggressions, you talk about critical race theory, if we talk about trans rights, if we talk about anything, is people afraid of just saying the wrong thing. And it's like if you're gemmed up with the arguments and you know what you think and what you feel, then that's one thing. But a lot of people are coming to these things and they're thinking, well, hang on, why is that wrong? And I can, and so they're the ones getting shouted down. They're the ones getting told that they're, guilty of all these horrible things. And so I think people are sort of retreating in and just sort of trying to make up their own minds with like-minded groups of people and trying to work through it. And yes, on the other side of that, people who are working through a lot of the toxicity and thinking, well, how is it helping us attack each other all the time? How is that dynamic helping us organize? How's that dynamic helping us work together? Because we all know what we don't like about that lot or those people or those kinds of folk or whatever it is. But, is any way we're going to work together, or are we just going to be picked off in little groups all the time? That's the thing. So I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on, but it's all below the radar because a lot of people are just afraid of putting a foot wrong, and not for bad reasons. It's like I say, they might have the latest degree in all the terminology you need to discuss these things and say something, put their foot in their mouth, and suddenly, oh my God, you've got a piley on, and do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Is that what?
Yeah, happens all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. And but I mean, I guess the other thing as well, we talk about the cancelling going on, but we can see this on the right wing as well. Just all sorts of stuff getting shut down. People at university. I mean, a colleague of mine here just put something on Twitter about a quote from Nye Bevan, who's the Labour health minister who set up the National Health Service, and he actually lost his job because he called Tories vermin. He said Tories are all vermin, and what he was actually saying, this was back in the 50s. He actually said it because he grew up in a mining community near here, where people were treated like vermin, literally, by conservative governments. You know,
I mean, literally, for those who don't know, people just have to know that, Churchill advocated the use of poison gas on Welsh miners in the 1920s at some point, I believe it
well, he
was.
sent the troops in. He sent the troops in, yeah.
And he
And
made
no one likes
jokes
him
or
for that.
something. I don't know if it was a joke or a serious statement, but it was
No in
in
Wales,
reference.
they don't.
It was talking about like gassing the miners, out of their holes. Like, yeah.
Well, yeah. That, I mean, he's not a big. There's not a big contingent of fans over here of that. But this colleague of mine was, he had a piley on by the right wing here, and nearly lost his job, and it was a really difficult time for him. So, I mean, I see this happening everywhere. And on lots of different levels, institutions, not just individuals. There just seems to be a big shut up culture going on, which is really weird. Everyone's telling everyone to shut up, shut up, shut it.
There was recently an Associated Press reporter who was fired because she made basically a pro-Palestine related tweet after the Israeli Air Force destroyed the AP offices in Gaza. And it wasn't, all that. It wasn't anything offensive, but apparently it was too opinionated, and so she had to get fired. So I mean, that's the sort of thing that's going on a lot.
Yeah, I mean, this is big time. Yeah, big time. I mean, any of these issues, hot button issues, if you come down in one way or the other, then yeah, you can lose your job.
Talk about why your impressions about the sort of underground conversation going on that's kind of not being held in public. Like, what are your impressions about that's going on? Like, what gives you the impression that that's happening?
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, the question is, I don't know. No, I don't. I mean, the point is, I don't know, because it's happening off the radar. But
Good,
I think
just
that
being optimistic. You're just
no,
making it up.
I'm involved in quite a lot of discussions myself with different groups of people, just informal chit chat about this, that, and thinking, oh, hang on, what's going on here? And I think I'm under the impression that I just think this is going on in a lot of different places, because just for the reason I said, that people need to communicate, people need to have these things out, and people need literally a safe space to do it. But you can't do it in public. You can't make mistakes. You can't explore ideas in the public realm. It's not easy to do. You can't make mistakes. You can't misspeak or get the wrong end of the stick, or because it's dangerous for a lot of people. So I just get the impression that a lot of this is going on. I hope it is. I hope it is, because we're in a bit of a state with it. I think all of us really, aren't we? We all really are.
I mean, there's this sort of cliquish, as we know, all of us here. I mean, there's this very cliquish aspect to so much of the left, whether we're talking about anarchists or socialists, or I mean, there's this kind of like insular, like people got their own vocabulary, and of course, and it's very strict, and you can't step out of your. I mean, that there's this kind of this aspect of the left culture exists, but like. Yeah, there seems to be, there's got to be people have got to be figuring out that isn't going anywhere. That there's got to be more inclusive. I mean, and I think one of the things, but when you talk about being the public conversation, I mean, as a performer, you're doing that, like or you were before the pandemic, and maybe online, but you're saying what you think in a public setting, and generally, I would say doing it in such a way that's actually very inclusive and appealing to a lot of different. You use humor as very much in a lot of your songs to communicate in a way that is, I think, that really it has the potential to reach beyond the choir, let's say, and I think that's very intentional. Talk about can you talk about your songwriting process and how you're trying to communicate what you're trying to Are you trying to reach? I mean, do you intentionally avoid using alarm bell words and stuff like that? Because I mean, to me, it sounds like you're just singing about stuff that if anybody has any clue about what's going on in the news, they're not going to have a problem relating to. I mean, this is like everyday life kind of reality, like in the COVID tapes, for example.
I hope so. I don't know. Gordon Bennett. I mean, you put on the spot there. I have no idea how this is all.
You have never done a workshop on songwriting. I know. I never, I never do them because nobody ever is interested. But I'm interested personally. Some people, wrote whole books on the subject. I don't know who reads them, but have you?
Me.
You do.
I read them.
Are you usually writing words before you come up with the music, Cosmo? Is it?
I think what it is for me. You see, the whole thing. I'll tell you exactly what it is. Right? It's a bit like. It's a bit like you're trying to avoid the rocks in the storm. Right? It's like, well, there's rock. We're going to have to move over here a bit, and then we move over here. It reminds me when I was a kid. I watched a program, with the Fantastic Four, and you got the Stretch Man, and he had to go through this tube, stretch all the way through, and this guy was saying, "You're coming up to a real high temperature bit here, and you're going to melt. So you need to go this way." And it's like, and you go there, another high temperature bit, and you're going to melt like that. And that's where the humor comes from. You see, so I just think of it a lot like. If I just, as soon as I go out there and sing a song or put a video out or put an opinion out, someone is just going to shoot me. But it's to try and do it in such a way, to make a point in such a way that you're addressing what you need to address. You're not shutting up and you're not censoring yourself, and you're not coming over like a fucking politician where you're avoiding it all.
So if you use humor, then.
So it's just a way of just kind of navigating your way through it, and I think it kind of gives you a bit of leeway in a way, because I think that if people know the sort of where you're at and the sort of territory you're on, then if you kind of slip in challenging little things here and there, they're not going to kind of take it in a jarring way. They might actually take it on board. So that's how I tend to do it.
Yeah,
I hope so. Yeah,
humor will get past your guards and your prejudices. But you have been. I remember you've talked to me about some of the responses you've got to that great song you did. I read it in the Daily Mail, so that's just what I think. I blame the immigrants, right? That one. Yeah. And you also said you got into trouble because of No Man's Possession, because you're writing from a female point of view. So these things do come up, right? Yeah. Even with your humor.
Well, the thing is, okay, so I blame the immigrants. I did that song and I sent the CD off to an Austrian, I think it was in Vienna. I just said, I'll come and do a gig, because I think Eva Supertramp had done a gig there, and she suggested, get in touch with this lot. And they were like, yeah, this is great, but we're worried about track 7 or whatever it was on the album. I blame the immigrants. What are your positions on the following subjects? Are you pro-choice? Are you this? Are you that? What are your views on immigration? And I literally sent them photographs. Here's me doing a pro-choice rally. Here's me doing an anti-fascist rally. I'm one of you bellends. Come on, I mean, they kind of got. And I think it was just the humour. They didn't get it. Yeah. It was just like, well, and it's a bit of a jarring song, because if you are not that way inclined, it can be a bit, oh bloody hell, what's he saying here? So yeah, that was fine. We kind of got through all that, and that was all cool. But the No Man's Possession thing was a song, so you're singing it from the point of view of a woman, and in the folk music world, that's really normal, So you get desert songs sung by women from the point of view of a man, and you get songs like, I married this horrible bastard lord who made me pregnant, and a man will sing that, and that's quite normal. And I think in the folk music world, if you take different perspectives, you can be potentially treading on eggshells or broken glass or something. I don't know, because I think it is, people have this whole thing, don't they, that it's this like, well, you can't say that because you're not that person, you're not a woman, so you've got all these privileges. And it's like, well, that's absolutely right, and maybe I shouldn't be saying these things, or maybe I should take that into account. But then this is the point, I think, if we lose empathy, how do we have solidarity? So if I can't imagine myself in your position, then how can I have any empathy with you? And how can I have any solidarity with you? Because I don't understand you and you don't understand me. So that's the end of that. Do you see what I mean? I think that's kind of going to the root of what we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, I've always felt that way. But how much of what kind of an impact, on this whole discussion around writing about like things that you know, as opposed to writing about, from somebody else's perspective? How much of a negative impact, overwhelmingly negative impact, did Bob Dylan have on this whole conversation when he said you should only write about what you know, when he kind of like, I mean, not that he's ever stuck by that, but he said that, and a lot of people, like songwriters especially, kind of religiously follow his every word regardless. I mean, maybe at least of at least a certain generation anyway, and maybe more than one generation. But this whole debate between, I mean, I know this is getting real geeky here, but the debate between like Bob Dylan and Phil Oakes, and at least not that there was really a debate, but in the minds of the public who are into these artists, there was different positions on this question of, do you write about only what you know, which is understood apparently, I think, to be something like along the lines of personal experience, or do can you write from other people's perspective? And it's always seemed to me quite obvious you can write from other people's perspective, and the proof is in the pudding. I mean, if you write a song from somebody else's perspective and you sing it for an audience of people who are from that background, whatever you're singing about, and they like it, then it's good. Is that what how do you know when you've written a good song that's not from your own perspective?
Well, that's a very good point, isn't it? But I think we're always doing this in the folk world, aren't we? I mean, you and McCall had this whole thing of like, you must sing songs only from the city or the town or the area that you were born in. So, I mean, I was born in Glasgow, and I moved away from Glasgow when I was 6 months old. So the idea of me still going, hey, you can't push your granny off a bus, singing that.
I'm totally convinced.
Fucking hell, I don't know, I don't know if that's really a good thing to do. But we're always doing this on the folk music world.
Push your granny off a bus, but the accent was perfect. Sorry.
It's this whole kind of purity thing. I've always thought the thing is like, it's like you say, if you've written a song from some perspective and someone picks it up and says, oh, I can relate to that, and I'm a woman, or I'm a this person or that. But I think a lot of the time, particularly on the sort of lefty thing that we've been in for years, it's not really like, okay, I'm trying to write a song from a woman's perspective. That's not the bad thing in itself. It's just like, are there any other women on the bill? Are there any black people on the bill? Or is it just white people? Because if it's just white people singing about things, then, or just men, or just whatever it is, I think that's more of the issue, really. Forget what people are singing about and just kind of have the big different perspectives there, and the audiences and all of this stuff, But,
That's a tough one, isn't it? What do you do with that? With this, because I mean, in the end, there's like the style, the music genre thing, and like, I mean, all this time that the music industry has been telling us, you like this kind of music and you like this kind of music, and never the twain shall meet, and all this, and then. It ends up that different genres have followings. I mean, however we define these things, genres, like whatever, but like you end up having following that is one type or person or another, oftentimes, in terms of like demographics. And how does that, it just seems, touring around in Britain in the acoustic music folk kind of circuit, like, pretty much like almost all the performers are white, and it's just impressive enough if you got a nice mix of genders, but you're not going to get a lot of, I mean, there's just not a lot of people into certain kinds of music. And what how do you, is that something that you, as it, like, I don't know how many events you organize or how much you have to confront that kind of like question of how do you come up with a good mix of performers, but you brought up the whole question of billing, and so how do you deal with that?
Well, you just I mean, I made this a bit of a bugbear of mine, actually, because I tried to work out how this was working and what to do about it. And the first thing I realized was that musicians are all attention seekers, no matter what part of the world they're from. So get a stage. That's the one. Invite people along.
Yeah.
I think, but I think so. For example, we've got a church hall around the way near where I live, which are used by all the asylum-seeking communities, refugee communities. They use it as a base. They have English classes there and support there. So we did an event there, which just got different musicians and used some of the musicians who were in using those facilities from the refugee backgrounds. And we had these amazing nights. But I think the key for that was the place, because I think it's easier for people. My takeaway with it all is it's easy for sort of people who are sort of somewhat privileged to go into places where there are maybe not so much privilege going on as then it is the other way around. So when we were trying to get gigs in bars, for example, just bars where they usually do music, and get refugee communities involved, and you just wouldn't have the people turn up. They wouldn't really turn up. You might get the performers turn up, but not the communities turn up, because that's not where they usually go. So go where they usually go and try and work with the people there and try and pull something together. And I think that's a really good model, actually, because this is what we did with this anarcho folk festival we were doing up until about 2014 in London. Exactly the same way. We just got all these different people involved, real diversity of talent. But I just thought, now we need to do this in politics, especially left politics, especially sort of anarchist organizing, because it was just very, very white. I just said, now we need to sort of take that methodology and work in that way, because actually when you've got to go that extra mile, but it's worth it, because you're putting all these other people in, and other people are feeling kind of ownership of what it is as you're doing, what you're all doing together. I think that's what the really important thing was. So I mean, these were only sort of localized little examples I'm talking about, and I think by the time various things kicked off in my life, I wasn't able to sort of pull it off. It's sort of something I wouldn't be able to pull off all over the country, but it was just an interesting way of approaching and putting these things together.
How was that anarcho folk
and it changed your music too, didn't it?
I don't know.
Working with Sally and all that stuff.
Oh yeah. But then that was really cool, because I just sort of get people in who live in the area, and I've got a little studio, and I'll record you doing whatever you're doing, and get people working together. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
That's He's got that amazing song about Gaza, didn't he? He wrote that haunting song about Gaza.
Solid.
Yeah. Which
he calls himself Oud Resists. I'm sure you've met him, David.
Right.
You did a gig with him.
I remember meeting at Oud.
That's the one.
Yeah, that was the one. Great.
That's him.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And how is this anarcho folk festival? Is this the one that's been happening in a different country in Europe every summer, or is that something else? There's been something.
Well,
like
there was
between Scotland and the Netherlands, but I don't know.
Yeah, no. There was one that went on in the Netherlands. I think this was going back to about 2012 or something, and a bunch of us went out there and thought, "Oh, this is cool. Let's try and do it in London." And we did it in London. We did a couple in London, and then we just sort of, I don't know what happened, but we just had we had a crazy one. The last one we did was we had a Kurdish folk group and an Iranian Palestinian oud combination, and it was just amazing. There was all this different stuff going on, as well as all the kind of usual things you expect and stuff like that. And I just thought, a lot of the old anarchist crew from East London all turning up and moaning, as we usually do. And I just thought, well, we pulled something off here, folks. This is the way it should be. Let's try and apply this to our wider politics. But then,
yeah, that's right. And it's a creative contact. So that's interesting to me, because I grew up in an environment like that. Because I grew up in inner city Melbourne, it's very multicultural, and my family were lefties. I was surrounded, we used to hang out with the Eritrean Workers Union and the East Timorese, and, the Kurds used to come and dance at May Day marches, all that sort of thing. That's intersectionality, I sort of take it for granted. Yeah.
nice broad definition of the term folk is. I know there's another nice way to
Yes.
approach the problem of the sort of like whiteness of certain folk scenes. Is, you know, you broadly define it, what some people call world music, and then it's there you go.
It's the music of the people where you are. You know, but the key to it is the collaboration and the cross fertilization. And you know, I love fusion music for that exact reason. And so Afrobeat or any of those kinds of things.
Yeah, they call it.
That's what you get. Yeah,
that's the word for when they don't have a genre for it. They call it fusion. You know, they haven't
which
put it in a box yet. Then later they'll put it in a box and have a name for it.
Yes, that's right. And then it gets broken down and more. But you know, that's all marketing.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a lot of it is, yeah.
But the guy who invented Afrobeat was his influences were Pan-African and Western as well. And that's, I'm thinking of Fela Kuti here, right? And he was truly a global musician, right, in a whole bunch of ways. And musicians always are, you know, even if, like Phil Oakes wandered over to Africa and, you know, started playing with musicians there, because wherever you go, you look for musicians, right? Yeah. So, you know, I think that's an important part of that under the radar changes that are going on, right? The more you go out and talk to people, the more, like, I think that's really interesting for you to say, you go where the other musicians are, you go where the refugees are. You know, that's the way to do it. You know, all of us with our white privilege, if we're reaching out, I've never had a bad response. You know,
no, exactly. Exactly.
Well, I reached out to the Palestinian community several years ago when Palestine was out here for the Asian Cup, and they were, you know, grateful. Positive, you know, they participated. They were just happy to get the contact, right? They made friends with me, you know, they gave me stuff. You know,
tour,
it's not hard.
Palestine tour of the Palestine football team's tour of Australia. I've heard a lot about it from a lot of people.
Such a good time because of your friend Jack, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's a whole other story.
Cosmo, it's been such a pleasure spending the hour with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been great, Cosmo. Thank you.
And I hear my children coming in. I'm going to go. Do you
guys
go to bed, or you have breakfast, whatever you're all doing?
Go on to Bandcamp. Buy all the albums.
Yeah.
Do that.
All right.
Take care, everybody.
Lovely to see you
in the real world, I hope soon.
Yeah, let's hope so. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Yes. Bye, everybody.
Take care. Thank you, everyone. Take care.